So hi there. Oh, very responsive. So my name is Darnell Pierre Benjamin, and so we're going to talk a little bit about equality. But before I even get into really talking more about myself, I kind of like to do exercises a lot. So I know, right? Audience participation, be ready. So I'm going to just start off by asking anybody, if I say Michael Chekhov, anybody familiar with who Michael Chekhov is? Okay, we got a few. So Michael Chekhov, he's a Russian-American actor, director, theater practitioner, author, the list goes on. And he created this concept called psychological gesture. Anybody knows what that means? Psychological gesture. Ring a bell? So, gesture, let's break down what a gesture is. A gesture is a movement with intention, right? For example, right? That's a gesture. Now, when you add the psychological element to it, psychological gesture, what that is whenever you look at a character's innermost being, who that person is. And a lot of times you do this with a script. So if you look at this character and you dissect the character, you find out what makes the character tick. Who is this person? Is that person a good person or a bad person? The list goes on. Well, what I started doing in my life is looking at psychological gesture in my everyday world. Who am I? Every day I ask myself when I wake up in the morning, and I usually have some type of movement. And the reason why this started is because I was doing a project back in 2008. We were doing a collaboration in my grad school at University of Houston with ASL students. And what we did, we created a play without words. And in creating this play without words, what happened is that one of the students, she named me using ASL. And how she named me was doing this. And the reason why, it was my hair. My hair stood out to her, right? And it was really funny because not only did that affect me in a way that made me laugh and made me smile, it also made me very emotional because my grandmother had just passed away that year. And a little bit of background. So I lived with my grandmother until I was 14 years old. And I lived with her because of words. I lived with her up to 14 because my mom had a hard time handling me because I got diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, and she wasn't really good at managing that. So, and my grandmother was. And my mom, according to Corinthians, I think it's 11:14, let it be known that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him. So we were never able to grow our hair, my brother and I. So fast forward, when I got to college, what do you think is the first thing I did? I grew my hair, right? Once I moved out of the house, I grew my hair. And I didn't give it any time. What ended up happening is that immediately I bleached my hair platinum. And then I chemically straightened it. The list goes on with all the things I did to my hair. And over time, I started getting messages from professors saying, Darnell, if you want to really pursue performing, you need to find your identity. You need to own who you are. And I feel like you're running away from it through all the things you're doing with your hair. That inspired me. And so I chopped off all my hair and I let it just grow naturally. And in letting it grow naturally, I saw my texture. And in seeing my texture, what ended up happening is that I realized my grandmother, so I'm from Southern Louisiana, and Southern Louisiana is filled with a lot of Creole people. And my grandmother was known for her hair. She had this gorgeous head of loose curly hair, and it seemed like in the light, there were these flecks of gold that would just pop out, right? So everybody always complimented on her hair. Mine is nowhere near as sexy as hers, but what I realized is that I am the only person in my family who has a semblance of my grandmother's texture. And I lived with her till I was 14. I was very, very close to her. And so when this student did that action, it brought all of those memories out because she had just passed away. So my pretty much everyday psychological gesture that I hold on to, even though it changes a little bit, the main one is always this. So what I would like to do, I would like for each person to sit down and think for a second of what your psychological gesture would be. I'll give you a couple minutes. Think about who you are at your innermost. And don't share it with anybody. Don't tell anybody what it means, but just, we're going to one by one share our gesture. Good morning. So I'll give you a little bit of time to think on it. Are you ready?
I got nothing.
You got nothing? I'll let you think a little more. What about right here? Okay. Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, mine's easy. It's very simple.
Okay.
Raise your hand because I will
Oh,
always
don't tell us. Don't tell us what it means. Don't tell us what it means. So just do that one more time. And would you mind doing it so everybody can see? And try to remember everybody's as much as you can.
Oh, really? Okay.
Ooh. Okay. I kind of like that. Okay. Love it.
Well, two have already been done that I was thinking.
Oh, you can repeat.
Well, I was going to do this.
Totally, you can repeat that. So she did a repeat of this one. And can we show the other side too? I love it. I'll take it, yes. Right here. Okay, I'm on board with that. Yes. Uh-huh. Okay. There's a lot of layers to that one. Hey, could you do it on that side so they can see it too? Okay, the collector. Yes. So many layers in that one too. I like that, yes. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. Ooh. Oh, and could you show the people in the back too? Yes. Right here. Oh, that's okay. No worries. Oh, yes. We got dimension here. Okay. Uh-huh. Yes. Uh-huh. Okay. Yes, and with a smile too. Right here. I'll take it, yes. Yes. Uh-huh. Oh, yes. And let's go right here. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes. Let's go right here. Keep thinking about Nixon now. Yes. And let's go in back there. That could be it right there. Uh-huh. Interesting. Yes. 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 Awesome. Give yourselves a hand. So what I want you to do is try your best to think about the ones that resonated with you in any way. Just think about that. Take a moment to think about that, and we're going to move forward. But I just want you to remember what just happened there, right? So I'll share some things about myself. Well, my name is Darnell Pierre Benjamin. I'm going to sit on one cheek here. And so I'll share, I'll go from personal to professionally. Personally, I was born in St. Martinville, Louisiana, which is a tiny little town in southern Louisiana. And I am black. I mean, that's pretty apparent, right? Yeah. And as far as my blackness is concerned, there's no way there's not a moment when you sort of come to terms with it. It just is. It's your being. It's how you go through the world, how I go through the world, right? Well, but I remember when I was 11 years old, a new element got introduced to me. I was on the playground, and I noticed that, this is 11th grade, I noticed that looking on the other side of the playground, I was playing with a group of people who were all looking at the boys. The boys were all over there doing their boys things, and I was hanging out with what seemed to be the girls, right? And I was teasing all the boys. And there was this moment of realization that hit me. I felt like, something's wrong with me. Why am I not on that side, right? Why am I not with the boys instead of being with the girls? And it was in that moment that I had this realization that I was different, that I was an other in some way. And I didn't have the word for what it was until later, until around like 12 or 13 is when I realized my sexuality, being gay, right? So that's number 2 with the personal side. Then we go into the third side. I was born in a very lower socioeconomic family. I would say we were probably upper lower class is how I described us, because we were not middle class. We were like on that nice little foamy part at the bottom, right? And there wasn't a sort of reckoning with that. It just was a reality. I knew that we had what we needed, but we didn't have a lot outside of that. So one of the things that was really important to my mom is education, 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 education. So my brother and I, actually, we are the only 2 people to have gone to college out of my family. And to this day, we're still the only 2 who graduated. So I went to University of Louisiana at Lafayette, and I got my BFA in performing arts because I had just as many credits as a dancer as I had as an actor. So I had a general performing arts degree. Then I decided, what more do I need to do? I need to do more because I still feel lost. I have this BFA, and what is that gonna help me do? So I went to grad school because I wanted to understand a business aspect of the arts. And I got my master's I got an MFA in classical theater performance because I was fascinated with Shakespeare primarily. It was so beyond my world. It was something larger than I understood or knew, and I wanted to understand it. I wanted to reach out further, right? So graduated in 2009, bounced around a lot all between that period, taking gigs here and there. And then I landed here in Cincinnati in 2009. And in 2009, I took a residency with the No Theater of Cincinnati when they used to do resident actors. And I was there for a whole year. And my intention was I was going to stay there for the year. And the plan was immediately afterwards, I was moving to Philly. Because my first night here, what happened to me is that I'd driven 14 and a half hours from Louisiana, because after grad school, which was in Houston, I'd gone back home to do the whole family thing before moving away. So got here, it was like, I think 7:15 p.m. on September 21st of 2009. And they were doing a show called Boom at the time. And I came out of the car, I went into the theater, and what I did, I immediately was going to get my key because they housed their actors. So I didn't have to move furniture, which was nice, right? So got the key, went all the way to Norwood, because that's where the house was, and get to the house, it's the wrong key, right? So after this 14 and a half hour drive, I realized, okay, not only do I think I'm settling in, but it's a real big lie. So then I had to drive back downtown and go to the No Theater, and I'm just rushing at this point. I rush out, and there was a couple getting out of the car. The gentleman was helping the lady get out, and they were a white couple, and immediately what happened is that she grabbed him, she pulled him in front of her, right in front of the door, and screamed and said, "Get away from me." And that was my introduction to Cincinnati, kind of. It was. And it kind of immediately made me say, okay, I'm going to do this residency, and then I'm going to leave immediately. But in that year, what happened is that I developed a love for the arts community. And pretty soon afterwards, Brian Isaac Phillips, who is the artistic director of Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, he directed me in Angels in America Part 1. And he said, hey, so you got your master's with Jack Young, didn't you, from University of Houston? So I run a Shakespeare company. Why don't you come and audition for me? And I did. Typically at an audition, you know, you do your pair, and you just do a contrasting pair of usually a comedic and a dramatic monologue. However, Brian had me do 9 monologues, because he kept saying, do you have another? And I just kept going, because he knew I was right out of grad school, so I had an arsenal, right? So, needless to say, I got the job. And so for 7 years now, I've been a resident actor and a teaching artist there. And most recently, I got a little fun promotion, and I'm an associate artist now in the company, which is exciting, yeah. And first black person on the staff, which is very exciting. Yeah. And also, I work with a dance company here called Pones, and pretty much what we do dance for social change. And for the past year, I've been on the board of the company as well. So the arts community has welcomed me so wholeheartedly here, right? Now, I say all of this background so we can now go into equality. So, let's define equality. According to Merriam-Webster, equality is defined as having the quality or state of being equal. Okay, so clearly I had to do more research, right? Let's define equal. So, equal is defined as, also in Merriam-Webster, of the same measure, quantity, amount, or number as another, identical in mathematical value or logical denotation. I'm going to read that again. Equal is defined as of the same measure, quantity, amount or number as another, identical in mathematical value or logical denotation. So I've always had a problem with that definition in regards to people, and here's why. That definition means numbers, means logistics, means statistics. We are people. We are not that. We have feelings, we have emotions, we have experiences, we have prejudices, biases, the list goes on. And all of those things factor in, which to me makes equality a very difficult thing to have amongst people, right? And I'm always drawn back to that Albert Einstein quote. I'm going to read it for you. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Anybody want to take a stab at what that means? What does that mean?
You can't judge everyone by the same caliber.
Exactly.
Everyone by what their gift is.
Sorry, say that again, please.
You have to measure them by what their gift is.
Exactly. So in other words, a fish can't climb a tree. So you can't call it, you can't compare it to something else that can climb a tree because it has different abilities, right? So going more into that with the whole idea of equality and my struggles with it, I started looking into all these different sort of comparisons. And one of them that came up to me is, so I've been living car-free for 5 years now, and it was a choice for a lot of different reasons, most of it environmentally, but also why not save money? The list goes on. So I started looking at the difference with people who drive cars, or motorists in general, versus bicyclists, right? Now, according to Ohio law, now you can, based on the county, the law changes. But in Hamilton County, specifically, if we're targeting Cincinnati, bicyclists, according to the law, they have to ride on the street. They have to ride their bikes on the street, unless you have 2 exemptions, right? And those 2 exemptions are, one of them being, you have to be 15 years of age or younger to ride on the sidewalk. That's one. The second one is only if you're on a sidewalk that specifically has the sign that says shared path, which those sidewalks tend to be wider to give more room for people to go, right? So if you're not falling under those 2 categories, you have to ride on the street, right? Now, the question that I started asking myself is, here we are with equality. We're going to put them on the same playing field, the bicyclists and people driving cars. But then I started asking myself, well, are we creating enough opportunity for bicyclists to be safe on the road? If you're going down Central Parkway, sure, there's a lovely little bicycle lane, but anywhere else there are very, very few other places where that is equal, truly equal, right? Then I started looking at another situation. I started looking at the gap in pay according to genders. So, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Equality, right? Equality, right? However, in 2015, according to the Pew Research Center analysis, women earned 83% of what men earned. And if we're digging deeper into that, black women make up 1% of corporate officers while earning 42% less than their male counterparts. Equality? Then I started thinking about Black Lives Matter. That was an organization started in 2012, and I'll read something from their website. When we say Black Lives Matter, we are broadening the conversation around state violence to include all of the ways in which black people are intentionally left powerless at the hands of the state. We are talking about the ways in which black lives are deprived of our basic human rights and dignity. So this organization has faced a lot of scrutiny for a lot of different reasons. Most people, the people who do tend to go against them, their argument is that, well, it seems like what you're doing is actually creating more of a divide. You're separating people, making it about black people. So then we have things like the hashtag All Lives Matter or White Lives Matter, right? But let's dig into this. So from the Washington Post in 2015, according to the most recent census data, there are nearly 160 million more white people in America than there are black people. White people make up roughly 62% of the US population, but only about 49% of those who are killed by police officers. African Americans, however, account for 24% of those fatally shot and killed by the police, despite being just 13% of the US population. As the Post noted in a new analysis published that week, that means black Americans are 2 times as likely as white Americans to be shot and killed by police officers. So I think about organizations like Black Lives Matter and the reason why they were created. They aren't about equality. Instead, they're going for equity. They're going for tipping the scales to make things balance. So then I started thinking about equity, right? So let's define equity. Equity, according to Merriam-Webster, is defined as the quality of being fair and impartial. The quality of being fair and impartial. Every time I come across the word equity, it's one of those words that we all seem to know what it means, but we really don't. So the best way I could describe it, I started thinking about a track. If we have a running track where, usually they're in an ovular shape, right? Yeah. You have, let's say, 6 runners, right? And you have these 6 runners who are going to run across a 400-meter race. Okay? Everybody with me there? 6 runners. Equality is when we say, okay, let's put these 6 runners all like this. Everybody at the same place. Here we have equality, right? However, we have an issue here. Because if you have those 6 runners start like this, what ends up happening, what happens when they get to the radius of the curve? What happens there, anybody? Anybody want to take a...
The outer guy ends up behind because of the longer distance.
Exactly. There's a longer distance. But that's equality, right? Now, what equity is whenever instead of having them on the same playing space, you measure the radius of where the curve starts to happen, and then you balance that with where they start. So instead of everybody being on the same line here, you tip the scales a little bit, right? That's equity. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today in regards to equality. So why do I bring up all this? I bring it up because I started thinking about what's going on right now in the LGBTQ community. There are more and more people finding specific labels for themselves. Right? There are a lot of people who are getting frustrated because they're like, oh my gosh, it's like LGBTQA, non-binary, X. I don't understand. It's just becoming too complicated. But I actually think it's not becoming complicated. I think it's getting simplified. I think what's happening is that people are taking a hold of who they are in their core, who they are outside of all these labels as far as being black and gay, and the list goes on. They're finding the quintessential nugget of who they are, regardless of what anybody puts upon them, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing, and it started making me think about the idea of otherness and being an other, and what it is to be an other in a world where everything is measured on majority. Because the problem with equality that I find often is that equality is taking a blanket and covering everybody with the same thing, whereas everybody doesn't have the same needs. And then you see oftentimes there's an image that became really popular where you have a fence, and there are the 3 people who are trying to see over the fence, and what happens is that they describe equality as the fence is there, and everybody has their ability to stand there, but what if you're shorter, right? So that's equality. But then the argument became about equity. Equity is whenever you take a little stump. So if you have the really tall person who can see over the fence without a problem, but then you have the middle height person who needs a little bit of a crate to stand on, right? And that makes them see over it. And then you have the really short person who needs a lot of a crate to stand on to see over the fence, right? I say remove the damn fence completely, and that's really equity, in my opinion. Now, what I started thinking about even more is this James Baldwin quote that just resonates with me. He was being interviewed by a journalist, and the journalist asked him, so what is it like to grow up black, gay, and impoverished? And his immediate reaction was, oh no, I thought I hit the jackpot. It's so outrageous, you could not go any further, so you had to find a way to use it. Then I started thinking about my own life and everything that I go through. So I'm a very proud black gay man, right? But one of the big struggles that I have in my life is I've always been on the outside of my separate communities. For example, I often tell people that I've only been called a faggot by black men. I've only been called a nigger by white gay men. So I spent a long time trying to figure out, okay, what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? Why can't I find equality? Why can't I find a sense of belonging even within my own communities? And I spent a long time trying to like reach on the outside and figure out why something's wrong with me, and I need to find something outwardly to figure that out and fix it. But then listening to that quote and reading that quote over and over and over and over and over again with James Baldwin about finding a way to use it, something occurred to me that I didn't need to search on the outside. If I focus on the things that make me me, the things that make me an individual, that is how I'm gonna find my place of belonging. Like, so last year and the year before, Cincinnati Shakespeare Company, we completed our canon. In other words, the history cycle of Richard II all the way through to Richard III, and how the monarch got taken away from the Richards, and it went to the Henrys, and then the Richards got it back, and it became really complicated, right? And I played Henry VI. And there was a lot of stirring about that. And the reason why there was a lot of stirring is because I am a black man playing this role. And so it wasn't necessarily bad stirrings, by the way, too. It wasn't. It was just people curious about it. And I remember for a little bit, I was kind of like, why does it matter? Why does it matter if I'm a black man? I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense. So I, for a little bit, was fighting against paying any attention to that. But then I got interviewed it was a professor over at Xavier. She interviewed me asking about what is my experience in playing Henry VI as a black man. And for some reason, that question shook my world. And the reason why it shook my world is because I started realizing I can't not be a black man playing that role. Because I would take that role home every night, and I had nightmares about it. And the reason why is because, just in case you don't know a little bit about Henry VI, he had one of the most tumultuous reigns. And the reason why he did is because his father was Henry V. And Henry V was this like awesome man who saved England from the French. He did all these amazing things and lifted up the community, and people loved him. He was revered. And then he dies whenever his son is 9 months old. So his son at 9 months old became king. Now, granted, he had advisors who were controlling the crown, but Henry VI was nothing like Henry V. Henry VI was timid. Henry VI, and there's a lot of research that proves that he may have been schizophrenic. So there was a lot of things going on with him. He was a timid person who was more interested in education. But one of the things you don't hear about him is that he did a lot of architecture work. He created buildings. On top of that, he started a lot of schools. But that's not what makes a king. So that was the tumultuous situation with his reign. So I spent 3 hours in each production, because the play is in 3 parts, but we did it in 2, so 1.5, 1.5. And so 3 hours in 2 years of being yelled at, of being attacked. And it didn't occur to me until she asked that question of what is it like being a black man playing this role, that it occurred to me the damage that was going on with me, being a black man already in my everyday life, dealing with so much adversity, being a gay man in my everyday life, dealing with so much adversity, and then taking on this role where for 3 hours I'm being attacked, and the weight that carried on me. And so the mixture of all these things started making me realize that I need to stop leaving all the things that make me me. And I got really obsessed with this idea of otherness. And so I decided I wanted to look into that more and dig into it more. And so one day I just typed into ye old Google, I typed in other. That's all I typed in. And one of the things that came up that stood out to me was the number 7 recycling sign. Anybody knows what the number 7 recycling sign stands for? It's other recyclables. And oftentimes it's recyclables that it's basically things, and oftentimes they can't be recycled in a lot of locations, but there are a few places that do. It's things like an iPod case or like sunglasses. It's like very random things. It's the things that nobody knows what to do with them, so they just throw them all in one big group, right? And I kind of took a bit of pride in that. and started understanding that it wasn't equality that I wanted or needed. It was identity. It was ownership of myself. So, needless to say, I got a tattoo with the number 7 recycling sign. And I got it as a reminder to myself that I didn't need to go anywhere else to seek for approval or anything. I needed to look within. And so this all brings me to the idea of why I did the psychological gesture exercise at the top of today. I did it because I feel like one of the big problems we have with equality is that it covers majority. Well, majority means nothing but the most. That's all it means, the most. But what about those who get left behind? So instead of focusing on what we have in common, what if we start focusing on how we're different? And if the more we can focus on how we're different and see and acknowledge the difference in yourself and love that and embrace that, how could you not see the difference in others and acknowledge and embrace that in them, right? So, thank you. Thank you. So my charge, I'm going to say not charge, my request is from this day forth, remember that psychological gesture you did. Remember how it was different from others. Remember how it was the same as others. Remember how you can connect with people who did something somewhat similar to yours or different. It doesn't matter. But think about yours and how you can go forth in the world and be the most quintessential version of that and see the differences in others and love that. And so I say all this because here I am talking about equality, but I hate equality. So I want you to leave that at the door because I don't think it works. Instead, I would love for people to go off and focus on individuality because I think something that's happened over the years is that there's been a push, some strange push for everybody to blend. And I don't think we need to blend. I think we need to push further away to see each other in our truest lights. So thanks for listening to me today. Thank you. And now I'll just open it. If anybody has a question for me, feel free to ask away. I am an open book.
I think given that people are social beings, I think there's always a tension between the idea of individuality and the idea of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you focus so much on individuality, it then does in some sense separate you, and people find a lot of comfort in belonging to groups and to tribes. So
Mm-hmm.
how do you think about that?
I think the best way to do that is, for example, what happened? I think the psychological gesture exercise, there were a lot of people who did things that were similar. And I think about even in those differences, there's some way to connect. And I think it's embracing the thing that is you and seeing, because we're all, at the end of the day, as much as we're different, I think we're also very alike. We're people, we feel, we hurt, we smile, we're happy, we find love, we lose love, and we all know how to identify with those things. But I think in looking within, for example, I'm not going to call myself a Buddhist, but I practice a lot of Buddhism, and Buddhism is all about the self. And I am a firm believer in when you focus on what's going on here, answer the calls that are coming in the house, from the house rather, that's how you can connect to everything on the outside, and you can bring in the good energy that needs to come your way. That would be my answer to that.
I would say that Buddhism is focused on the self, but also focused on the self so you can express compassion to the world.
Exactly.
So, and I think those two things need to be both there, right? So focusing on the self, but with the intent to take that selfless and compassion into the world, not to hold on to it. There's an American idea around individualism that says, I want to keep everything for myself, share it with the world.
And yes, and so thank you for bringing that up. For me, when I talk about all this, I'm not speaking about ego. It's not an ego thing in the slightest at all. What it is, it's just about awareness of the self. And in awareness of the self, I do believe that you can find the ways to connect with others. Because if you see yourself clearly, I think that's how you can see others clearly.
Do you think that through connecting with other people, that can also tell you things about yourself?
Oh my goodness, yes. I think most, we have this saying in theater that, a lot of times you'll have these performers. I should probably not get specific, but you have these performers who think that all you can do is do. I perform. I think it's just as important to see theater, and that's how I connect to what you just said. I feel like I learned the most about myself as a performer by watching other people perform. And then now the challenge, of course, is how do you become aware in the moment without checking out? Does that make sense? So I do totally agree with that. I think it's when you become attuned to this is how you can connect here.
Sort of a give and take between yourself and others.
We were talking about something earlier about how this idea of, how do you, when you read all these terrible stories going on in the political world, how do you self-care and manage, And I know for me, I have to find out that balance between being aware and understanding what's going on and making a conscious effort to step away. Sometimes I have to step away because I'm a very emotionally available person, and that's a good and bad thing a lot of times. So I have to make a conscious choice that, and I'll stop there. I have to make a conscious choice to just take a step back. Anybody else? Yes.
I just think if you take the word different and thinking about yourself or others and just replace it with unique, you kind of get over that, God, I'm different this way, I'm different that way. More like what you were saying, those are values. Those are valuable parts of each individual. So you just replace it with the word unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I even
And
think,
it's not negative anymore.
I like that. I might get that tattooed on me as well. But even earlier, when you said the word weird, weird is often looked at as a negative word. People look at weird as a negative thing. And I feel like that happens a lot with even difference. Difference is looked at as a negative thing. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the denotation, it is negative.
Because we want to belong.
Yep. But
But then we lose yourself if you belong.
Exactly. And, I think about even my hair journey and trying my best. All I wanted to do was explore and explore and explore when I was just running away from what was already there. Yes.
Is it safe to say, Darnell, that when you're talking about embracing difference and pushing away from blending, in part because of your experiences, I've had similar experiences with my different communities, especially as a white-seeming Hispanic person. Are you maybe advocating we can find deeper connections by not connecting on our adjectives and instead connecting on our thoughts and our beliefs?
Yeah, who are you? Yeah. But still, at the same time, while I can do that, who I am at the core is so connected to my blackness, my gayness, me being a performer. The list goes on. All those things are inherently there, but they're there because there's something deeper in me that brings those to life.
But maybe the most meaningful belonging might not be belonging to the black community solely, or the gay community solely, or just those two communities, right? Belonging to people who love theater, belonging to people who
Exactly.
are passionate about sustainability, which crosses over so many different adjectives.
Because even in my personal life, I have a core group of 3 really great friends, and the thing that connects us really is performing, because I've always struggled for a long time, actually all through grade school, for example, all through grade school, and I mean it's all through grade school, I had no black friends, and it bothered me so much because I had so much negative energy from the kids at school, so much. little background about St. Martinville, Louisiana. To this day, at the high school, there is still a separate prom for blacks and whites. And how they get away with it is that at the school, they host the prom, right? Which is where all the black kids go. But there's a private event hosted on the same night every year by a white family where all the white kids go. And so this was my environment growing up. And now granted, for me, I didn't go to high school there, thankfully, because we moved to New Iberia, Louisiana, where I went to high school. But that's my understanding when I go back home. That is the world in which my family lives. And, and one of the struggles is that when I go home, there are expectations for me to be a certain way. And the sad reality is I'm not close to my family, especially since my grandmother passed away. There's been a huge separation. So I see them once every year and a half, and so they don't know me. And I've been on my own since I was 18 years old, and they've never set foot, my mom or my dad, ever in a place where I've lived, ever, in an apartment, anything. And it's not for what I believe to be a hateful reason. I think it's just they're not traveling people. They were born in St. Martinville, Louisiana, and they're still in St. Martinville, Louisiana, and that's what they do. Well, except my mom is now in New Iberia, Louisiana. But yeah, so my understanding is, and that's from where all of this comes is because of this background. I had to take hold of the thing that I know and understand about who I am, regardless of what any community tries to define to be something, because I am black, I am gay, I am a performer, I am all these things, but I don't have to just be that.
I just have to ask this question.
Go for it.
If I was married to a black man, where would we go to the prom?
See, there were people who did. Now, I want to make it clear, though there were these separate entities, there were white people who did go to the prom at the high school.
Okay.
There were. But the downside, what would happen a lot of times is that they were described as white trash. Like, that's the conflict that would happen with that divide. And then as far as the black people who, I honestly don't think any black people were allowed at that private event. I'm pretty positive. Because at the high school, you can't turn somebody away. It's the high school. But with a private party event. Got one more question. Anybody?
Despite politics being go crazy nowadays, do you think that after this presidency, do you think it's gonna help us as a society heal? They're more open I know.
Oh, no, I'm with you.
But do you think that will ever come to a point where everybody identifies by themselves and everybody's unique and everybody can accept that? Are we any near way close to that?
I like that question. So my response to that is one of the things about this recent election that bugged me is that I remember when, and this, if anybody is a supporter, this is a safe space. I am not judging you, but I have my opinions. And one of the issues that I had is I was watching people left and right post memes and make fun. And this is just when he was a candidate, right? And the whole time I'm like, this is a real thing. This is a threat. This is not funny. This is not funny at all. And then when the election happened, my immediate reaction was, oh, well, this is a good thing. And I know that sounds terrible. I looked at it as a good thing. And the reason why is because, bless you, me living with all of my issues and my adversity, finally what I was noticing is that when that man became president, what happened is that more people got involved in activism. More people got involved in politics because it wasn't just black people. It wasn't just Hispanic people. The list grew. It became women as a whole. So women came out the woodworks to fight back. And so, yes, it's been tumultuous, but what's happened is that I feel like so many more people are attuned to politics and aware of what's going on in the world because it's affecting them. So there's a sense of solidarity. I remember the day that I went into, so on that Tuesday, I had to choreograph for Much Ado About Nothing at Cincinnati Shakespeare Company. And I walked in, and everybody's like sitting there crying. All the white people were crying. And I walked in and I was like, okay, and for me, it was another day at work. I've lived this life. That man is nothing but the representation of the ugliness that has been real for a long time. And now that ugliness is on a pedestal and people see it. And so I think, yes, there will be healing because now people can see it. And it's not just those who have been affected for decades and decades now. So I think there will be healing, but my worry is what always happens is that, for example, after every progressive president, there's always a conservative one, and in various degrees, this one is a different kind. But I do believe that I think we have a standing chance to get better after this. I feel like we can't not get better after this. So yeah, that's my response to that. I think healing will happen, and healing is going to happen hopefully in a broader way because now there are more people fighting the good fight. Thank you all.